As our finances seem ever increasingly harder to control, it still feels like those auto manufacturers out there are finding new and interesting ways to tempt even the most average of us into the idea that we could live on the larger side of life. But let's say you're already in that position. You already have, I guess you could say, deep enough pockets to be able to afford a little bit more of an extravagant sense of living. And let's say you're also maybe a bit of a family person. You want the wife or the husband and the kids to come along for the trip. You know, with as many cars as there are out there on the road, if only there was a vehicle that existed that could allow you to exemplify such an idea. Oh wait, it already exists. Whenever someone tells me that bigger is better, I haven't always been inclined to agree with that statement every single time. However, when this average Joe gets to experience that more grand side of living, the rewards are definitely there. For example, driving around in this gorgeous 2023 Lexus LX600 for the past few days has definitely given me a new sense of respect for those who can actually afford to live by such means. However, it still does make my stomach quiver a little bit to know that what I'm sitting in right now, with the optional F-Sport package added on, along with a whole host of extra little goodies, means that I will have to open up my wallet even further than I ever thought before. Because as this car sits right now, I'm driving around in something that costs just short of $110,000. Yikes. Now you would think, being the top dog of Toyota, you would get absolutely everything, the most over-the-top and outlandish features you could possibly want. And you would possibly expect, too, that this would have a lot of the better things compared to its predecessor, the LX570. Not exactly the case, though. The teeth on that Lexus comb may have been a bit bigger than they anticipated, because they also decided that instead of a V8, okay, boo-hoo, go V8 or go home, I know that's my philosophy too, that this thing deserved a twin turbocharged 3.4 liter V6, which doesn't sound like a lot when you're talking about over 3 tons of SUV in some cases. However, with 409 horsepower and 479 foot-pounds of torque on tap, put through a 10-speed automatic transmission and a permanent 4-wheel drive system, it not only means that your wallet's going to be screaming at the pump because this thing only gets 19 miles per gallon combined, but it also means, F-Sport or not, this Leviathan of Lexus will go from a dead standstill to 60 miles an hour in 6.1 seconds. What's probably the most perplexing aspect of the LX as an entirety is the fact that Lexus gave this thing, in their infinite wisdom, 6 different driving modes, and that's if you exclude the off-road more focused stuff with the crawl mode and the multi-terrain select system to pair with the 4-wheel drive. But this thing has, you know, the typical stuff: eco, comfort, normal, things to make you feel more relaxed. It also has a sport mode, which should wake things up, you know, a little bit more, you know, liven things up in your big family truckster. But being the F-Sport model, this one has Sport Plus. Now, I've never really imagined what 3 tons of Lexus feels like when you really get aggressive and let her eat, as they say, but I'm just going to turn the knob a little bit, put her in Sport Plus here. Let's give her the beans. Let's see what she'll do. Whoa! Ho, 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 ho! feel like I'm sitting on a jet airplane right now because I don't even hear the engine. All I hear is nothing but wind. But that is, ooh, just, that is beautifully smooth. I first fell in love with this engine when I drove it in the Toyota Tundra, then in the Sequoia. I fell in love with it in the LS500, and now here in this brutal example of Lexus luxury, it still feels just as potent, if not even better. But I think the thing that mystifies me the most about this particular LX is the F-Sport part of it. Because when Lexus adds the F-Sport package to any of their other cars, it firms everything up. It makes it more sporty, more dynamic, and dare I say more engaging to drive, despite being a more luxury-oriented vehicle. But in this, for one, I have the optional active height control added on, so that does mean that not only are you paying $1,300 extra to have such a feature, but it also means the air suspension feels like I'm sitting on a memory foam mattress. This thing just floats going down the road. You can feel some of the little undulations and, you know, imperfections in the road, but still, it also means it's very quiet. I do not have to raise my voice very high to, you know, get my point across to people. And not only that, whether driving around town or at 50 miles an hour like I'm doing right now, you turn the steering wheel a little bit and it is just effortless. It's not quite one finger steering, but it's damn close. But let's face facts here. While this thing may feel like you're surfing the atmosphere while you're out on the road driving it, when you take a step back and look at it, this is one of the most brutish and in-your-face SUVs you will ever find on any road in any part of the world. This one here with the F-Sport treatment specifically, it is the most aggressive of the bunch. And sitting here in the plain gloss black, it is absolutely sinister looking. And talking about sinister, it looks like it's about to eat you for one with this monstrous iteration of the Lexus spindle grille. I actually like it in this case, despite how tall it is, because it's not as angular as some of the other cars that wear the same grille design. I love how the innards are all blacked out just like the rest of the car, and when you're spending over 6 figures, every trick in the book is included in the options list or as standard. The triple beam LED headlights, the all-in-one LED turn signals, and LED daytime running lights. You have LED fog lights down below. You've got the air skirts that go through these front corners here, already aiding in the wide open aerodynamics that this front end already presents. But you have the auto cornering lenses, auto leveling headlights, auto high beam assist. Everything like that is all there, including a full brand new Lexus safety suite. Dynamic radar cruise control, it's already there. This one has a 360 camera, the intuitive park assist, front and rear. You have front and rear collision warning, rear collision braking. I mean, you want technology, you're looking at it right here. Despite its brutish appearance, however, the LX600 is not the biggest of the boys that you can find in today's SUV market. If you're comparing apples to apples, this thing is half a foot shorter than a Lexus LS500 sedan. However, if you really want to go big, this thing is over 2 feet shorter than a Chevy Suburban. So while it may be lavishly appointed and ungodly expensive, it's definitely not the biggest family hauler you can find on the market. And speaking of not the biggest thing you might be expecting, while I love the 22-inch dark chrome finished wheels that we have on this F-Sport trim, they almost look a little smaller than 22 inches to me, but that's because they are wrapped in some fat 265 50 series Dunlop all-season tires. Now, when you're extending your wallet to this sort of level, you would expect to get pretty much every single nuance and trick you could possibly think of thrown in as part of the package. And you would be right to a pretty solid extent in this case. However, Lexus is still one of those brands that will nickel and dime you in any way they can. For example, the little things like, you want that crossbar set up there on the roof on my test car? That's a $450 extra, thank you. However, things like these giant power folding exterior mirrors that have the camera in each one for the 360 monitor, equipped with a blind spot monitoring at the same time, that's a part of the price tag. You want things like the sunroof. Oh, that's already included. You want things like the ubiquitous advanced keyless access with a rather dated yet still pretty futuristic looking key fob. Every single one of these LXs has it as standard, and it has all the functions you want: lock, unlock, power tailgate, panic, and even the releasable key blade that comes out of the bottom, which is kind of handy because there's no hidden compartment to find the keyhole on this thing. It's already put right into the outside of the handle. And just like all the other Lexuses in the family, if you want to unlock it, just have the key on you, just grab the handle. And then if you want to lock it, there's that little indentation right there. Now, while the front of this thing may have a much more monstrous and aggressive appearance, as far as this car's rear end is concerned, it still sings a little bit of an aggressive song, but it's not as in your face or as polarizing as this car looks from the other end. However, Lexus did still include some rather intriguing details, like the taillights, for example. I love the split LED bars here for your main rear taillights. You now have the full-length LED light bar that goes all the way across the back. Kind of a signature thing of some of Lexus's crossovers and SUVs nowadays, but you still have the LED reverse lights and turn signals. I love how they've spelt out the brand name across the back instead of just putting a singular badge right there in the middle. But it's a very subdued look, if I may say so myself, and there's nothing really back here to even suggest that this is the F-Sport model. There's no fake exhaust finishers to make you think that this is a more aggressive full-size SUV. Not like you would really need an exhaust finisher, because as I said, this thing barely makes any noise whatsoever. But you can see little subtle hints of things like the intuitive park assist going across the middle of the bumper there, and you even have a nice little hidden cover here, which when you remove it, reveals a Class 4 tow hitch underneath. Now, if by sheer virtue of its gargantuan size, you might be thinking, wow, that looks way big enough to hold me, my family, and all of our stuff with absolute ease. There is no way this thing could disappoint anyone in terms of how much it could hold. Well, hold that thought, because as I walk up to it and I kick my foot under the rear bumper to open this rather noisy tailgate, might I add, when you open it, well, the first thing you're faced with is the back of the third row of seats. And while 3 rows of seats is not a bad thing to have, it is not so great when it comes to the cargo capacity. Now, like I said, with this being not the biggest of the 3 rows out there, you're only looking at around 11 cubic feet total usable cargo space behind the third row seats. Now, never fear, if you want to extend that a little bit, you can push the buttons on the side here, in which you can not only tilt the seats forward, but you can fold them completely flat, in which, once you do so, you will be looking at a little over 40 cubic feet of cargo volume. Now, that still sounds pretty usable, right? That sounds like you've still got a fair amount of room back here. However, if you want to go great guns and you need the most room possible, fold down the 40-20-40 split fold second row, and you reveal a rather woeful sounding 64 maximum cubic feet of cargo volume. Now, that is the big disappointment here, because the brand new Mazda CX-90 that I reviewed last week had 75 cubic feet of cargo volume. So this 6-figure barge that I've got here has less overall cargo space than a much less expensive mid-size family SUV. Now, while it's plainly obvious that on the outside, this truck is definitely putting on a much more in-your-face and aggressive approach to what is already a very rugged-looking family truckster, the F-Sport package continues its onslaught when you step inside. And I call it an onslaught because while this truck has every single giz-whiz and gadget you could possibly want, when you factor in the F-Sport goodies that Lexus has thrown into the mixture, well, some of them don't exactly make sense to me. The steering wheel, for example, leather wrapped, half perforated on the sides, and it's heated. everything you would expect when you're paying six figures for a family vehicle, let alone a Lexus product in general. But then they've put the paddle shifters on the back. Not exactly necessary. I mean, if I wanted to blast off into the sunset, I could just go into the mode selector and crank it up into Sport Plus and take off down the road. So things like the paddles, not really to my taste for something of this magnitude. However, speaking of magnitude, not only do we have one of the craziest interiors I've ever seen for a luxury vehicle of this type, with this red and black leather going on, the turned aluminum that's sitting here in place of normal open pore wood, but I have not one, not two, not even three areas of screenage going on just between what's in front of me and what's in the middle. I have four different screens in here. To begin with, the gauge cluster, half thin film transistor with every single piece of information you could want, and four analog ancillary gauges. A bit of an old school throwback if you ask me, and I love the way it's presented. Just above that, I have a massive heads-up display. Again, if you're paying this kind of money, you expect to get that. Same thing with the giant infotainment system. But then Lexus went a little bit further, because right in the center of the dash is a sole screen just meant for the front half of the climate controls and all of your settings for your crawl mode and multi-terrain select that I just mentioned. I mean, I never thought that you would need a screen just for those three little things. But again, if you're paying this kind of money, it really is a case of go big or go home. Now, while staring directly in front of me still gives me that typical Lexus-y type vibe that you would expect from one of their cars, crossovers, or SUVs, what's in the middle of this console here really proves that Lexus is raising the bar when it comes to vehicles like this, because standard is a 12.3-inch infotainment system, and that's not even the best part, nor is the fact it has Toyota's newest Highlights infotainment system, which has been integrated for more Lexus-type features, such as the cloud-based navigation. Not exactly my favorite feature, but I can kind of look past that because I have wireless Android Auto, wireless CarPlay. Oh, and if you like to indulge in some optional extras, pay an extra $2,700 US. Yeah, you did just hear me correctly, and you get a 25 speaker Mark Levinson audio system. Now, Mark Levinson, I will say, depending on the Lexus vehicle in which it's applied, can be pretty good. But when you have as much space inside of a vehicle like this to push all those sound waves around, it goes from being a very good system to sounding like you're in the most premium of concert halls. Okay, sure. The cloud-based navigation, infotainment, and audio systems are all things you would expect from the Lexus brand themselves. But what really proves that the company is turning the dial up further towards 11 is what happens once you look beyond the infotainment screen. From just underneath it to the back of the console, everything in here is bespoke to the LX. But my favorite party trick is what happens when you open the multi-way adjustable leather-clad center console. You would expect there to just be an empty space, but in the LX, not so. In here is a standard cool box. In other words, that's a fancy speak for a fridge, but it is so cold, or it gets so cold that, well, it's not cold enough to form ice crystals, but to prove that point, I had a soda sitting in here earlier today, and over multiple hours of filming, it still stayed as cold as the moment I took it out of my fridge at home. Now, while sitting in the front of the LX definitely gives you the impression you're in someone's tech-filled luxury mansion, being in the back here, at least in the position I'm in right now, I feel like I'm more in a luxury apartment than a luxury mansion, because there's really not as much space back here as I initially thought there was going to be. Now, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people will argue that, yes, I could have scooted the seat forward a little bit, and you can fit someone over 6 feet tall back here in the back. But I have the seat in the driving position in which I find most comfortable. And, well, yeah, you can see I have to spread my legs a little bit to get around the driver's seat and actually get comfortable back here. That said, what I'm sitting on is still very comfortable. They feel just like the front seats, and they have, well, all the basic upper end necessities you would want. The rear half of the quad zone climate control, well, you basically could adjust it any way you want. These outboard seats, even though I have a bench in this particular case, they are heated and they are cooled. Need I reiterate, if you're spending this kind of money, that is stuff not only you're going to want, but that you will expect from a car like this. Things like sunshades, oh, those are already included. That was just an afterthought for me. Same thing with the center console, which I find very appropriate in this case because not only is it very plush, but these little cup holders in the front, they are at the perfect distance for me to rest my arm perfectly straight and keep a nice firm grip on my cold drink. All right. Ooh. Okay, getting into the third row seat. Not exactly the easiest sense of egress and ingress you could possibly think of. However, once you are back here, well, I kind of feel like, as far as the seats themselves, I feel like I'm sitting in a child's high chair because the seats are so narrow. And not only that, with the floor sitting a little higher up, I feel like now my knees are pointed more at me than they are straight ahead of me, like I might find when I'm sitting in the second row. And what I find interesting is that this is the biggest SUV you can find in Lexus's arsenal. And I feel like even some of their smaller 3-row offerings in the past gave you more room in the third row than you find in this top of the line LX. That to me is insane. What's even more insane is that they give you, well, basically an infinite number of ways to make yourself even less comfortable with these third row seats. You've got these little triggers right here that allow you to tilt or recline the third row seats. Now, right now I'm in the fully reclined position. I can push the button as many times as I want and it's not going to go back any further. But perhaps, let's say I want to visit with my second row passenger, I could just push a button and now the seat folds forward. Or maybe you really want to make yourself out of the ordinary and push one of the buttons down here that's normally meant for someone to reach in the side of the door and fold down the third row seats from the outside. So is it the most comfortable place? No. And would I want to spend my time back here despite having a USB-C charger on each side and that's about it? That's a big fat no from me. And on that note, everybody, this now wraps up our review and drive of the 2023 Lexus LX600. You know, even though this thing is as big as a family home and it cost a third the price of the average one, if you are somebody who is looking for the absolute pinnacle that Lexus has to offer from their SUV lineup, this is your answer. And what a statement it is. I've always said that the LC500 is my favorite Lexus car, but you know what? Even though I could never dream of affording one in a million years, this is now one of my all-time favorite Lexus SUVs. But anyways, guys, if you've enjoyed this video and perhaps you've learned something about the LX or you just like what you see in general, give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, because trust me, stuff like this does not happen very often, and none of this would be possible without subscribers and viewers like yourselves and partnerships like Lexus North America. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.